Harrison Ford returns as Indiana Jones in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Everything you've likely already heard about this film, unfortunately, is true. Every rumor, every spoiler, it's all true. And seeing it all played out on screen is even worse than it sounds. The film starts out in Nuremberg near the end of World War II, where Indy and his friend Basil have been captured in their attempt to find the Holy Lance that pierced the side of Christ. After a handful of contrivances that absolutely should have killed everyone in the vicinity, the de-aged CGI Indy, with present-day Harrison Ford's voice, manages to escape and board the train that is leaving with his prize, which is now held by Nazi astrophysicist Jürgen Voller, which is revealed to be a fake. Though there is something aboard the train that certainly is not. The Antikythera, the Dial of Archimedes. Well, half of it anyway. After a long, poorly lit, terribly staged action piece full of bad CGI, our deepfake heroes manage to escape. Flash forward to present day in 1969 New York, and we find Indy exactly as the trailers had presented, half naked and passed out, waiting only to yell at his neighbors to keep the noise down, glossing through divorce papers sent by Marion, and finally giving a lackluster lesson to a room full of disinterested students. In short, Indy's totally pathetic. It's in this coma-inducing final lecture that he reunites with his goddaughter Helena, the self-proclaimed smart, beautiful, independent daughter of Indy's old friend Basil, who warms up to Indy by posing as someone who actually looks up to him and compliments him for the sake of having something positive to use in the trailers and the promotional videos. He takes her to where he has kept half of the dial, and where she then double-crosses him, frames him for murder, and goes off to Tangier to sell the dial on the black market. Charming. Helena stops to laugh at Indy's old age before he is then pursued by Voller's henchmen, and in a long, poorly lit, terribly staged action piece full of bad CGI. He eventually escapes and reunites with Gimli for a short cameo, before heading out to Tangier to find Helena and the dial, with which he hopes to clear his name and stop Voller from repossessing it. Indy finds her in the middle of an auction where we get this gem of a line.
You stole it. Then you stole it.
And then I stole it. It's called capitalism.
And Helena and Indy and the almost mustachioed short round replacement escape Voller in a long, poorly lit, terribly staged action piece full of bad CGI. They charter a boat from Indy's longtime friend Zorro, who takes them diving for an ancient tablet that will show the location of the second half of the dial, which they recover before Voller magically appears, kills Miguel Bain, and learns of the location of the dial himself. The trio escape, Helena stops to laugh at Indy's old age, and they find the dial, when Voller magically appears again, kidnaps Indy, and reveals that he plans to use the dial to go back in time and win World War II for Germany. Helena decides she's going to rescue Indy, I guess, and chases after Voller in a plane in a long, poorly lit, terribly staged action piece full of bad CGI. They fly through a portal in the sky, but realize that it doesn't lead to the time period they thought they were going to, where Archimedes is waiting for them in the Battle of Syracuse. Voller's plane crashes, and everyone dies inside, and the implications of this plane being found in this time period are, well, who cares at this point? Indy meets Archimedes, and having been shot previously, decides that he just wants to stay and bleed out and die in the past and witness history. What a noble, selfless end to cinema's greatest hero. But luckily for us, Helena was there, who in a single punch knocks out Indy cold, drags him back to the present day, and reunites him with Marion before the camera cranes up to a shot of Indy's hat, and then ends on a round iris transition like an episode of Looney Tunes. What an absolute disgrace of a movie. If there's one word to describe this film, it's meaningless. Not only in Indy's literal involvement, but in the outlook of the film itself. Beyond the superficial old man jokes and one-upping from Kathleen Kennedy's latest idealized self-insert character, this film seems to have a fundamental lack of understanding of what constitutes an Indiana Jones film, and it all goes back to the Big Bang.
Indiana Jones is completely irrelevant to the story. Yet with or without him, the Nazis find the Ark, open it, and die.
The recently held argument that Indiana Jones is irrelevant in his own story, while making for a debatably funny joke and a debatably funny sitcom, is simply untrue, as it takes the plot at face value, ignoring the basic purpose of the hero and the heroic story, which is beyond simply just defeating an evil force, as anyone with enough might can do this. On a deeper level, heroic stories are about sacrifice of the self in service of others, about saving them, about dying to your old self so that others might live, and in the process being reborn. St. George is remembered as a heroic tale not just because he kills a dragon, but because he rescues a princess. Luke Skywalker isn't the hero of Star Wars because he blew up the Death Star, but because he saved his father's soul. In the same way, in each of the Indiana Jones films, his involvement has weight and meaning not because of the fate of the artifacts, but because of the fate of those around him. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, he saves Marion. In Temple of Doom, he saves a town of enslaved children. In Last Crusade, he saves his father. And even in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, he saves his friends and his family. In each of his films, the true purpose of Indiana Jones, the thing that makes him a timeless classic hero, is his willingness to go into no-win scenarios for the sake of the salvation of others. In Dial of Destiny, this basic heroic aspect is stripped away. It leaves the viewers with a broken, depressed, useless character who serves to inspire no one, saves no one, and accomplishes nothing, taking the Indiana Jones doesn't matter argument and literally applying it to this film. Indy 5 also simply looks just atrocious. Even disregarding the horrible CGI, every scene is lit completely flat, only giving regard to the foreground with no separation or depth in the background or its composition. It's one-dimensional, and specifically during the nighttime scenes and the raining scenes, it shows the obvious focus on attempting to create a moody backdrop in order to conceal stunt doubles and heavy CGI, and it just comes across as fake and lifeless. So, at least it matches the tone of the film in that regard. If you've caught my previous video on Indiana Jones, which I'll link at the end if you haven't, you'll know how Steven Spielberg utilized his mastery of framing and shot composition to create cinema's most compelling action films, framing Indy in his action scenes dead center and often using his silhouettes and shadows to create a strong visual association with the character. In this film, these elements are blatantly missing, and it makes this film feel very generic and bland, and not at home at all alongside the other three Indy films, or even Crystal Skull. James Mangold has carved out a niche of making films centered around miserable, broken, depressed has-beens forced into one last mission, which, though that worked really well in Copland, far and away his best film, here it's an absolute misreading of what audiences want to see from an Indiana Jones film. Although there has been stiff competition in recent years between Rings of Power, Marvel, Star Wars, there seems to be no other film franchise that has had such a disdain for its lead character while simultaneously trying to profit off of his back with his latest installment of Indiana Jones. Well, all my fellow film nerds, that's all I've got for today. Remember to keep your lighting soft, keep your focus sharp, and I'll see you next time.
What the hell I'm doing up here 40 feet in the air with cramped shoulders?